Hey, Brigham with Drift here. Welcome back to my garage. In this video, 4 things I think you should know about the Amplid Snommelier. So, if you're going to review the best powder boards out there, this one's going to keep showing up on the list. I've been fighting off this board for a while because on paper, I feel like it's a little bit small for me at my size and for its intended purpose. And I don't think I was wrong about that, but eventually I couldn't resist it, especially when it came out in the bubblegum pink. I love this color and I just had to get on it. I really like this board, even though I think it is a little small for me for the intended purpose. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but before I do, check out my specs and my biases below if you're new here so that you know where I'm coming from. We're committed to getting these boards in a variety of conditions, especially in the powder, before we let you know what we think. And the first thing you should know about this is kind of a beef I have with Amplid in general, and that is that they lack wide boards. Now, that's the bottom line. They're out of Germany. They're a smaller brand, but they make very nice boards. They have a pretty significant spread of boards, but their size runs are a little bit limited. The Centrifugal series, which is like their highest end boards, they don't have any wides, and that to me they all run a little bit narrow. When I say narrow, I'm saying if you have bigger than a size 11, I would be thoughtful about your Amplid choices. 11.5, you're getting away with it. 12, all but 2 of their boards, I think, are going to be too narrow. So the Future Shape series, you know, each of those boards only comes in one size, which to me I think is kind of a shame. I'd maybe like to see them cut the amount of boards in that series in half and offer a spread of sizes in the most popular ones. I don't know. The Singular doesn't come in a wide. I haven't reviewed that yet, but I feel like it's a little bit too narrow. They don't cater very well to the bigger rider. They do have the Aloha Vibes and the Big Kahuna. Those are both plenty wide and for big-footed riders, but I think having ridden the Aloha Vibes, I felt like those boards are designed for someone who's not just got big feet, but they're also like 50 pounds heavier than me, which is not going to be my jam. So I think across the board, they run a little narrow, and you're going to want to look out for that. To me, this board, which is billed as like a big mountain powder gun, if you're a bigger guy, let's say you're pushing like, I don't know, I'm 185, and with my avalanche gear, I'm probably closer to 200. If you're pushing that 200 and you're bigger than an 11.5, this can still be a really fun board. But to me, this is like a medium powder gun. It's not like the ultimate deepest day big powder board. So really good float, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But because of that narrow waist, and it's not that long, it's not like an insane powder board for me for the biggest, deepest days. But if you're more average size, this is absolutely that board, and it's phenomenal. So Dave, the owner of Drift, he's about 20% smaller than me in height, shoe size, and weight. And this thing was an epic big mountain powder gun for him. He loved it. I love it too. It's just not the board for those days for me. So the second thing you should know with that in mind is that the looks of this board can be a little bit deceiving. Yes, I mean, mainly you've got a massive swallowtail, then a big wide nose and a bunch of taper. So you just think like, well, that's a surfy pow board. But it's not. The unique thing, and actually part of what I really love about this board, and you've heard me talk about this with the Tail Gunner, similarly, this is how I would describe as like a free ride feel in a powder shape. Floats like a powder board, but it really kind of sets up and rides like a free ride board. I would weirdly, maybe it sounds weird, but I would compare it almost to like the Flagship as far as how it feels on the hill. The swallowtail works. It helps drop that back in. That big wide nose and that length helps it float. But flex-wise, and stance-wise and side cut-wise, it really kind of feels more like a freeride board. It's got a really stiff nose, and it's actually got a pretty stiff tail. You do have some setback, but it's not insane. You can see here that the tail's not like crazy short. And you've got some camber that goes to a little bit past the front foot, and then you start to get that rocker. The third thing I would share, because of that stiff nose, and this is part of why I really like it, you can set this thing up with a more traditional stance, and you can ride it very centered on your bindings. It's not asking you to weight that back end and surf off of that back foot. You can stand on that front foot and really push into it. The nose is really stiff, and so you can put a lot of weight and force into that nose. And I really like that, again, helping that board plane a little bit more in the deep snow rather than like sit back in it like some powder boards do. So you probably can't see it, but the most unique thing about this shape, if I'm remembering right from their tech video, is that the board is thicker here and here, and it's actually thinner between the binding. The flex overall, I would say, is kind of a free ride flex too. It's fairly stiff, but you get some flex between the bindings, which is unique, and again contributes to like this nose that you can really put some power into. So the fourth thing, as far as conditions, powder, amazing. Again, especially if you're an average sized rider, this is going to be an epic board for the deepest days and the biggest mountains. If you're a bigger rider, it's going to be a little bit more of an average powder board, but still amazing and a lot of fun. Groomers are fine, nothing to write home about, but it's fun to carve. I would say in crud, I might have to just say that it's bad. I felt like this thing got kicked around like crazy. My experience is that these big wide noses, the longer they are and the bigger they are, the more they just seem to get kicked around when you're in nasty snow. So as Amplid describes it, this thing is like a big mountain pow board because it has that free ride-ish feel. It's not a surfy tree board. This is actively difficult actually to swing around in the trees. I didn't mention this earlier, but the side cut radius is almost the same as the flagship. I think this is 9.25, and the flagship in a 165 is a 9.4. That's a pretty big radius. It's not super turny. It's not super surfy. This is for big, steep, open, high speed, big mountain powder runs. We're talking like cat skiing, heli skiing. The first couple runs at the resort in those wide open, untouched fields, and maybe in some, not so densely spaced trees, but it's not going to be like the Japan board, the, powder hunting board that you get into those tight trees with later in the day when the open fields are all tracked out. But when you get this into what it's made for, it rules. And I could only wish for one that was a centimeter wider and like a 172. Amplid, if you're listening, I'm interested. Thanks for watching. Hit me up in the comments with your questions or your insights. Love to hear from you. If you find these videos helpful, please subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff to help us out. Tell your friends, and we'll see you in the next video.